Hello, hello. Good evening, everyone, and we are live. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, John.
Good evening, sirs.
Yes, and so tonight we are happy to be talking about a very special topic. It is finding God in Loki. Yeah. So,
That's true.
so for tonight, just to introduce myself, my name is John B. I am the Christian Geek, and we are part of Level Up Geek Nights, where we talk about topics that are geeky related, about
Hmm.
games, TV series, movies, and normally we connect it with our faith, right? Right, John?
Normally.
So, John, introduce yourself, sir.
So tonight is kind of a compact night. So it's we're doing a two-headed dragon stream. Um,
John and John.
John and John. It's a John and John stream. Um, paano ba? Introduce myself. Uh, well, I mean, if you've ever been watching our podcast, you you'd know us by now. But yeah, basically, I'm also LUGN's other core member, and I am normally introduced as the COO because of my work, or boss man. If anyone knows that term, I respect you because it's a slightly niche term of something I love. All right, season two. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It is. It is. Yeah. The main story of Loki in this thing is pretty much ended. However, the world and the universe continues. So, but yeah, before we get there, of course, spoiler alert, we will be discussing the entirety of Loki season 2, focusing on different parts, but essentially this is your spoiler alert. If you haven't yet watched, this will be hitting a lot of the stuff in it. So, yep. Suffice to say, we do highly recommend it. It is a very high quality, entertaining, and well done series. Um, a little, a little subpar, although I still think their shows are, for the most part, still very enjoyable. But in the post Infinity War Endgame uh era, it's gonna be very challenging to ramp it up because there's a different expectation to it. But anyway, that's a talk for a different night.
Yeah,
So we'll tackle that some other time.
I think I think one of the things that with most of the big hit characters retiring, like Captain America, uh, and of course the death of Tony Stark. Gasp! Spoilers. No, just kidding. Um, a lot of that, a lot of the MCU has been trying to find its footing with its new cast of characters, and I think Loki is um, Loki with Loki transitioning from a villain into a not necessarily a hero, I guess, but more of an anti-hero. Um, it's a welcome change, I guess, and I think for a lot of who watched Infinity War, we kind of felt that Loki's storyline kind of got cut short all of a sudden.
Yeah, because
Right.
he just died, right? He's just gone.
Just when he actually developed a healthy relationship with his brother.
Yeah, when things were like really getting good, I guess.
Yeah.
So
So we see here, but this is a different Loki. of course, right? So this is a Loki, and this is, I think, one of the things that MCU has done well, even though it's kind of self-contained, is that they actually have really explored the idea of timelines and the multiverse, right? So more than just simply going from one universe to another, it's also exploring what if the existing universe branches off to a different time or different circumstance.
Yeah. So it is a very interesting show.
Yes.
Very interesting. So how do we start? I don't know. It's kind of for me. It's like okay, how do we? You kind of have to bring season one into it, and then
Yes.
just kind of take it all together. Although we're focusing on the entire season two, of course. But so you made a statement earlier that I just want to clarify, and for us to kind of get back to normal, or rather not normal, on the same page. Sorry, on the same page. When we say okay, this is not the Loki from the timeline, the stuff in the movie. Yeah, stuff in the movie when he's okay with Thor, and then suddenly clash with Thanos, and then his storyline gets cut off. The Loki in the TV series, just to clarify, actually, and also just to refresh memory, was plucked out at what point?
Yeah. So that that Loki was plucked out during the Battle of New York. So this Loki, if you guys remember watching Infinity War, rather Endgame, they went back in time to get the Infinity Stones during those time periods. So back in the first Avenger in 2012, we remember that one of the Infinity Stones was actually held by Loki in the Tesseract during the Battle of New York. And so they had already captured Loki at that time, but because of the time heist,
A new set of events occurred.
a new set of events occurred. So the regular time is still ongoing, as explained by MCO's timeline. So doing something in the past doesn't affect the future. It just creates a branch timeline. And so that's what happened in this case, where their actions in the past created a branch where Loki actually escaped with the Tesseract.
And that's the one that they plucked out, and like suddenly, whoops, you've been pruned.
Yes. So,
right?
And this is where actually they first introduced the Time Variance Authority, or the TVA, which is one of the biggest entities in the Marvel universe, not just in the cinematic universe, but actually in the comics, because the TVA and the multiverse, yeah, because the TVA basically is in charge of keeping the timeline clean,
keeping the multiverse managed.
Yes.
Without it like going haywire and crazy and destroying each other. So, which we did see bits of that with other movies like Doctor Strange, diba? He did jumping to parallel universes. So there's a touch on that, and of course Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse. So a lot of interesting things here and there. But
which is interesting because I think many of the movies are exploring the multiverse now. So I think with Doctor Strange they did explore. In fact, the title of his second movie was Multiverse of Madness, right? With Wanda, and then we have in the Spider-Verse we are seeing the exploration of that with the Miles Morales animated series, and I think with Madam Web, the new movie that's about to come out, they're also exploring the Spider-Verse in that as well. So I think it's relevant to see that because the problem with most comics is that sometimes characters seem to be disjointed from the rest of the reality of their universe. So this is where multiverses come in, where they could actually just, it's happening in this specific universe, it's not happening in the main timeline. So that's how multiverses come in. And in the case of Loki, I think they did a fantastic job of actually clearing that information with the audience that this Loki isn't the original Loki that we have been following and watching. This is actually a new Loki. And at first I was actually kind of annoyed because
new old Loki.
I mean, it felt like, oh, they're now going to develop again his character. It's like I was already invested with the old Loki. So
Yeah, but they bring him up to speed quite quickly because of also the same thing. The time variance basically says, well, here's who you've been, who you are, what happened to you. Zoop. So the first season was focused on that, on the different kinds of Loki and the way basically he goes and
I think it also
what
explores, aside from that, I think it also explored really, who was in charge of the Time Variance Authority, who was in
yeah,
charge of making sure that the timeline, at least in this show, the sacred timeline was kept sacred. Basically, that the main timeline is the one everything is following, and everything else that branches off need to be destroyed. And so it's a question of
mm,
um, who was really pulling the strings. And then this is actually where we're by the end of the show, we are actually introduced to Kang, which is a
yeah,
very interesting character. And
mhm,
in this regard, he was a godlike character because it was basically he was sitting at the end of time, and
yeah, managing all the strings of time.
yes, so it kind of gives you that idea of he's kind of like a god figure. And I mean, if you look at the
Yep.
biblical God, God resides outside of space and time,
Yeah,
and he is managing everything that is going on. And so,
correct.
but of course, as most characters in MCU, no, godlike characters are still human after all. They still
Yeah,
are flawed
they have a lot of
characters,
flaws. I have a lot of they are defeatable.
basically. And so we see here at the end of season one, we see the death of Kang, and this triggered a series of events where Loki himself, being originally at the start the bad guy, is now looking for a way to stop the chaos and
Yep.
bring back the timeline to its to a better state, so to speak.
Because at that point, he'd already like gone through his character progression again. So this is basically him fast track. Yeah, basically him fast track through all of the MCU progression to a more, not exactly him, but it's like, oh, I understand why I became this person because people understood me, and it's kind of funny to say it just that way. It's like, oh, people understand me now. They value me. They treasure me, and they've actually also grown to love me, and I also grew. So it's like, oh, okay. It's like seeing a copy of yourself in the future and all many copies of yourself in the not good ways. So it's like, talagang,
Yeah,
that's a pressure cooker of growth.
indeed. And you know the thing is,
And that's where we find him at season 2.
yeah, and indeed I was reflecting on Loki's character, and one of the things that I noticed with this with Loki, he was how do I put it? And this is me. At the end of the day, we are responsible for our
Mm.
actions, and we
Yeah.
are we do not
We
we
should be.
cannot shy away from the consequences of those actions, no matter how much we
Mm.
try. There will always be consequences to all of our actions, and
Mm-hmm.
I think Loki did experience the consequences of his actions. However, at the same time, you can also see that his environment had changed his character progression in the way that, because he had a group of people that he started to call his friends.
Mm.
In this series, I'm like, wow, he's really calling them friends. More
Yeah.
than, and he has never acknowledged anyone as friends, right?
Yeah, because
The,
he was suddenly plucked out and placed into a position of, you could say he had a, I guess he had a safe, quote unquote, um, space. Although actually looking at the seasons, it's like, how is that a safe space? But somehow he got it to work. I think maybe it's the fact that, you're forced to, he was forced to grow regardless and acknowledge so many things, emotionally and whatnot.
and I think that's the beauty of life, is that, and the beauty of God actually in real life, is that God never allows us to stay stagnant in our situation, and that he would always place us in situations where we could actually grow from it, right? And so we experience trials, tribulations, and the primary purpose for that is for our growth, for us to learn from our mistakes and to learn from the situations that we are put in, so that we can mature.
Rather than the situations we're put in, with the situations which we are allowed to experience.
Yeah.
I would also praise, because it's like a little different there. It's not like, oh, here's a difficult position, you need to grow, let's put you in it. It's like, no, the world is a difficult place, just like Loki experience. Like, and it's just, the world is a difficult thing. It has its challenges. So therefore, you will be allowed to experience difficulty in certain ways. So
And I think
I think that's how we're like, when you say we're put into difficult situations, it's that kind of putting in. It's like God makes use of the situation to grow, to help us grow.
and I think
And
when we take a look back at Loki, is that one of the reasons why he ended up the way that he did, because he was really a spoiled brat. Actually, if you think about it, both Thor and Loki were spoiled brats.
they're the result of really dysfunctional parenting. Yes.
So
Very dysfunctional parenting. Terrible parenting.
Yeah, and I think in the case of Loki, once the privilege was taken away, because he no longer has the protection of his name or his family, etc. And he is now in a place, the TVA, where it didn't matter. Even the what do you call this? His magic didn't work. The
Everything didn't work.
Infinity Stones even were just like what do you call that?
They're just desk ornaments.
Yeah, exactly. And so in that regard, I think it has pushed into a point where I have nothing left. And so it had
The only thing you had was, well, it basically made him, you have to operate at a human level. Right? He had to operate at a human level. Just mortal brains, brawn, and abilities. Diba?
And I think it helped that he was in a kind of a love-hate relationship with his variant, or his body double, the female Loki, Sylvie. And I think because Sylvie's experience is vastly different from Loki's. Sylvie's experience was that she had been running away from the TVA for decades, right? Years and decades at that point. And unlike Loki, who had grown up to privilege, she had grown up to almost nothing. And so
because they plucked her out at a point where she was with her parents only at a very young age. She didn't really get to experience a life.
Exactly. And I think that makes how in the case of Loki, is that he kind of started to learn that the life experience of Sylvie made an impression on him. I think for me that's how I see it. And so
definitely.
So in that regard, he kind of started to understand the value of enjoying life, enjoying time with the people that actually care about you, right? And so he actually started to care for, Mobius was basically his best friend, and the other characters, B-15, Casey, who by the way is Filipino, if you don't know.
Well,
they all became like part of his quote unquote crew, and of course I really like the introduction of Kihikwan as Ouroboros in that series.
yeah. So we have a couple of new characters, but actually not that many. So Loki 2 was more focused. I mean, it's still focused on Loki essentially, um, but the other really interesting dynamic there is um, when Ouroboros comes into the picture, and with regards to the other version of Kang. So, so in this timeline, because Kang the Conqueror, the one, what was his name again?
He
The
who
name
he
of
who he who remains.
He Who Remains, right? With that version of him out of the picture, um, all of the different Kangs now exist again, right? So because all of the Kangs exist, they get, I guess, I don't know, they get to play around with that tidbit, no? Uh, and it's interesting how this version of Kang is so different, but also so the same as the other versions of Kang, right? So he's still a genius, he's still really smart, an inventor, whatnot. But the heart of this Kang is somewhat different.
Yeah, I think I think this the earlier version. This is an earlier version of Kang before he becomes Kang, and
Yep,
this character is more. Yeah, he's a he's a con man,
he's
and
a con man,
but then I
but
guess
he's
that's
not he's not evil. He's just, I would say, forced into that because of his life.
yeah, and I agree with that. I think he had to go into that kind of lifestyle to support
Mhm.
himself and to actually explore more of the the ideas of
The
science that he's
TVA,
actually trying to
science.
understand, right?
Yeah,
Yes, for science.
for science, exactly. That if there was a term made for this guy, it was for science.
I think
So there's
in a sense, I think that the longer that Timely became as he evolved into Kang, and the longer that he was Kang, the more that his heart hardened, the more he became obsessed about his own mortality, right? And I think that's how he evolved into that. And it's kind if you think about it, it is kind of sad that this guy eventually, Victor Timely, eventually becomes uh, he who remains, and
well,
it's
we don't know that because there are many versions of there are many versions of Kang, and are so the question is, are all versions of Kang He Who Remains?
no, but this
Because we do know there was a war between the different Kang.
but this specific Victor Timely is the precursor to this gang of he who remains.
Ah, okay, I never got that impression, but
Yeah, because even Miss Minutes was given that was given privy to that information, and that's why she's the one who was sent back to give that Victor
ah,
Timely
I
the
didn't catch that. I didn't catch that.
yeah to
I did
give
not catch that part. Na like go to this specific Kang because he's gonna be me.
yeah.
I did not catch that at all.
So
Because the Kang that we see here is like a, he's be brave, Kang. Be brave, Victor.
but
Be brave, man.
in this case, he was still the idealistic Victor Timely. You know,
Yeah.
he's very intelligent. He's finally he realized that his theories and the things that he's been reading from Ouroboros's book is actually
Mm.
true, and so um, he's in this state of mind, I guess, that now I need to protect the things that I created, right?
Yeah.
So and
But
so
I think it's also a different situation because I think the previous Victor Timely just was by himself. Wala siyang kasama, wala siyang crew.
yeah,
But this version, he was surrounded by,
people.
I wouldn't say good people, but by generally people who were interested in him. Some of them liked him and his welfare, specifically the TVA guys. So yeah, the TVA guys wanted him alive and well. So sorry, like we're really bouncing around um Loki here. Like so yeah, so Loki's character grows, Kang and his different iterations. was basically they're the two main characters that we really see here in different aspects. There are a lot of good supporting characters, of course.
Yeah.
Si Ouroboros was a really good supporting character. I wouldn't say he grew that much, but he was very interesting in of itself already. And tsaka si ano, si that other guy you mentioned, the Pinoy guy,
Casey.
the Filipino guy. What was his name in the
Casey.
Casey? Right, si Casey. So Casey turned out from a minor support character, and he had a bigger role here. I like that. And funny enough, Sylvie actually had the more minor role.
Yeah, in this and
Which
in
is, I
this
think,
regard.
fine because her arc was finished. She already solved it. Like, this is what I want, and I'm done. So we got to see more of the rest.
And I think that because she was no longer the big villain of the series.
Or no longer the key figure.
Yeah, because in this series it's basically I'm here, I live my life, except that, you know, eventually she realizes she can't live the life that she wants uh because, you know, you can't escape, in a sense you cannot escape responsibility, you cannot escape reality. And then she was in that regard that where, oh, I'm gonna stay in this timeline. She even becomes a McDonald's employee from the 1980s.
She wants a nice, simple life. So okay, we're jumping to characters here.
Yeah.
Not exactly how our conversation was framed, but then again, it's fine.
By the way,
it's difficult on what to focus.
Yeah.
Do you have any comments in the chat, by the way?
yes. So,
Right.
Hi Vince and RJ both said the Infinity Stones were paperweights. That's the word we were looking for.
Paperweights, yeah, and table decoration.
And then
Paperweights,
Vince
yeah.
said that the variant is the precursor to He Who Remains. So Victor Timely is really the precursor. So yeah, because he's the
Okay,
one that
noted.
siya daw yung pinuntahan nila to as the fallback. So he was the fallback. So he really is the precursor. So anyway,
So assuming that we just left that particular Victor Timely to the hands of Miss Minutes and
and Renslayer.
what was her name again?
Renslayer.
Renslayer. If we left him to their hands, then he would definitely have ended up as Kang. The
Definitely.
Conqueror. So, what's his name?
Kang the Conqueror.
He Who Remains. He Who Remains. Yes.
So-
He would have ended up becoming He Who Remains without any other intervention.
Actually, he isn't really Kang the Conqueror because Kang the Conqueror was the one in Ant-Man, if I remember correctly.
Ah, that was one of his versions, right?
Yes. So, this one is specifically He Who Remains, this cat. So, and as we will discover in the MCU as they're building it up, there is going to be a movie called Kang Dynasty, which is basically it's bringing all the Kangs together as the big baddie for that film. And actually, I have no idea how they're going to execute that. Anyway.
Yeah, because there are a couple of big issues, specifically the artist being pulled out. So we'll see. I think they brought him back, right? So we'll see.
Yeah.
But Masters is, as our friend Vince has mentioned, has shown himself as a really good actor here. Actually, really great actor. So I am looking forward to that. We'll see how it comes out. Yes,
Yes.
John.
So yeah, sorry, may nag-message lang sa akin. So, yes, to clarify, if you're watching the stream, yes, the Kang that Ant-Man fought is Kang the Conqueror. The one in Loki is He Who Remains. And there are a few other Kangs which actually has been shown in one of the post-credit scenes of Marvel. I don't know their Kangs. And honestly, I'm not quite clear with the what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not the biggest aficionado or the biggest geek over the character Kang because there's actually another Marvel character that I'm waiting for that I'm more familiar with, Doctor Doom. So
Yeah, dude.
so And for me, he's actually the bigger character. So anyway, yeah. So uh, going back to the story, because I think this is where Loki shines is because there are a few moral dilemmas that are actually uh, presented in this series, and I think
Right.
one of them is that the idea of um, of whether or not any individual has the right to dictate what timeline uh, should
Mm.
be prevalent. And I think one
Right.
of the things that Sylvie, from the very beginning, was saying is that by you dictating what is the sacred timeline or what timeline should be running and compared to all the other timelines, you are playing God. That's what she says.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
what right does any individual have to play that role?
To dictate over everyone else.
Yes. And I think that's
And
a very interesting question.
it is. It is a very interesting question.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, obviously, this is one of those things that a lot of people will be like, "Oh yeah, how can you have the right to do that thing?" There's a huge difference between He Who Remains and us being Christians. Like, okay, for us, we believe that. Paano ba yun? There are people who would say that what gives God the right to dictate what must be. And
Yeah.
then you have the concept of He Who Remains, who's like, I enforce what I think must be. So might be one of those things that can go deep. But the funny thing is like God actually gives the playbook to us. He establishes it for us. And he doesn't force people to play in the sense na he doesn't unlike He Who Remains using the TVA, he doesn't just abduct people and kill them right off the bat, right? Like he doesn't just like, okay, your timeline doesn't fit in with my plan, shoot, annihilate everything. Um, God allows everyone to make their own decisions and choices. So there's a big difference there. So I'm just, examining that entire bowl of
I think
nuggets.
this is where also the idea of free will comes in.
Yep.
Um, and I think that's also something that was explored because uh, one of the moral conundrums or moral
Mm.
dilemmas that they had was that these people didn't have a choice. They were not given a choice.
Right,
And
right.
so in a
So
sense they were not given a chance to even plead their case
right,
that
right,
they should live, right? And so they
right,
were just eliminated because they were not part of the sacred timeline. And
right.
I think that's a very interesting idea that, again, it goes back to the question of Sylvie, who any of us have the right to play God, um, and in a sense, parang dictate who should live and who should die,
Mm.
and that these people should be given the choice to make that decision.
Mm.
And
This is what the Lord allows, actually. The Lord allows us to make our decisions.
and I think that's a very good point where when we think about God, we often think of God, and a lot of people think of God as this all powerful being who dictates what are things that are going to happen. But in reality, um, God gives us a set of commands, and God gives us what He wants and what He dislikes or He hates. But it is ultimately our choice to follow Him or not, right?
Mm.
And that's actually a totally different thing. So in that regard, yeah, God has the power over time and space. God has the power to dictate if He wanted to, but He doesn't force people to do that, but rather gives them the option. Are you going to follow me and do as I command, or are you going to do your own thing? But of course, if you do your own thing and
It
don't
has its
follow,
own consequences.
it has consequences. And in the same sense, like even in Loki, when one of the consequences of Sylvie killing He Who Remains because she could not be persuaded otherwise to not kill him.
Right. So
Eh,
Sylvie is kind of like stuck on that he who remains must die. And unlike Loki, although to be fair, I guess he had experienced much different things at that point. But she could not be stopped from not killing him.
Yeah, she could not be stopped and she could not be convinced or persuaded. And what are the consequences? The timeline just went crazy in that
Mm-hmm.
sense, right?
Correct.
And I think that was the argument.
There's no way to control the scaling of the timeline.
Yeah, and I think that was the argument between Sylvie and Loki, where Loki sees uh, the value, though he who remains is not someone he wants to align himself with, but the only way to save those that are already there with him is to stop Sylvie from killing he who remains.
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, in that regard, when we think about it, it's a really interesting dilemma because Sylvie also says, "I'm not gonna give you a blessing to kill me," right? She does say
Yeah.
that, and she says that, um, yes, you will be able to save this one timeline, but what about the rest? How what happens then to the rest of the people? They never had the choice, right? So
So Sylvie poses a specific problem, but he also just has no answer. Thank you very much, Sylvie. So, like, it's either, okay, Doom billion. It's like Doom count this billion, or Doom count this billion. I give you both problems. So, like, because of her actions, she has no answer to the problem she creates.
yeah, and Loki at this point is just really concerned of saving his friends more than that the entire multiverse. These people have been with me. They have supported me. They believe in me, and
So
so
he
I
wants to do something for them.
must.
I want to let them live their lives.
And in a sense, actually, and I think that's in that conversation that Sylvie and Loki had in the bar. In a sense, it's a form of selfishness on Loki's part because he doesn't want to experience losing his friends and going
Yeah.
back to the way he was before, that he didn't have
Yeah, that's true.
any friends. But in that regard as well, that he becomes so focused on trying to save his friends that he forgets that there's this entire universe of people that need saving, entire multiverse of people that need saving,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
and and so I think that's definitely something that it's an interesting thing that they keep exploring again and again. That there is that people have to have, number one, people have to have a choice. They have to have free will. But
Mm-hmm.
and the idea where is the saving of one universe worth it at the cost of destroying everything else or allowing everything else to be destroyed?
Yeah. It's actually scaling up the idea of, is one life greater than many lives, because the one life that matters to you greater than the lives of countless others.
And
It's
it
kind of
has
like the same problem.
it has the similarities to the Star Trek what do you call this mantra by Spock, where he says the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. So it
Mm.
has some parallelisms to that, and
It does.
that it's true. Sometimes you have to weigh in what's more important to the many people over the few, and in this case, the many people that the question here is the this timeline versus the billions of other timelines that there are in the world. And so I find that it's also interesting because is it worth trying to save people? And I
Mm.
think there's this scene in Loki that I just really found funny because he kept repeating the timeline over and over again, and then he would go back to
Yeah.
an earlier timeline to try to save it again and earlier and earlier.
It's actually kind of like how video gamers try to do the perfect play. Like, there must be a perfect play to this if I keep, the term scum saving.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say file and just keep going back and trying to RNG the right thing, and he does that so many times, and it's like no matter how he tries to fix things, it's like no, there's no way to scum save here.
I like the
You
fact
gotta
that he spent centuries to the point that he became an expert
yes,
on.
because it's like the only way to make this faster is to be an expert myself, and it's like he became that expert. That was funny too.
So, and I think that he kept trying to repeat the the time loop over and over again to find a way to fix everything. But
Yep.
there are things I think in life that we just ultimately have to let go. That we really can't do it according to our plans, so to speak, because nothing
Essentially, that is what happened. Yeah.
nothing really goes according to plans.
You can't control everything. Sometimes a situation is just bad, and there's not really much of a way to fix it. So, parang he tried to redo the same pattern from so many different angles. He acquired so many skills and whatever, but sometimes it's just you're just stuck there. So you have to approach it from a different angle, right? You have to find a different play or dynamic altogether.
And I think
Find solution.
it's interesting that eventually he comes to a point where he has a conversation with he who remains.
Yeah,
After all the repeats in.
back and forth. Yeah,
Yeah. And I think one of the flaws that he who remains has is that he's ultimately a victim of his own hubris, where
yep,
he is so, how do I put it? He believes so much in himself, so much that he felt that there was no other way for Loki and Sylvie and the rest of the crew to get it right unless they do what he wants them to do.
yep.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, by a reasonable human understanding, that's not unreasonable because he probably went through time as well, being he who remains, countless of times. So it's like, okay, I've simulated this countless of thousands of millions of times. It's kind of like Strange doing like, oh, there are how many trillion, what was that thing? I don't know how many trillion worlds in which this works. Remember that one?
Yeah.
So,
It kind of reminds me of Doctor Strange where he looked through 14 million so and so uh
yeah,
possibilities,
timeline,
timelines, and only
possibility.
one was he saw where they could win. So, um yeah. And I kind of I do agree with you there in that regard. And I think it, it's just that again it comes back to the hubris of he who remains, who
Yep.
felt that he had the ultimate answer. And I think I really liked that in the case of Loki, he learned to just let go, to realize that he eventually realized for himself, exactly, Vince, predestination or free will. So, and Vince, I know you have such a big thing for predestination discussions, and I think I think in the case of Loki, he almost felt like there is no other choice but to save Cap, and that he had to kill Sylvie for the rest of his found family to live. But eventually, he discovers that he doesn't have to follow. He discovers what he actually needs to do, and I think this is where I see a huge reflection of Jesus Christ in a sense, where
Mm.
where you can see in the final moments of the show, Loki decides to quote unquote sacrifice himself, do what needs to be done in order for the rest of them and the entire multiverse to
Mm.
survive, right?
Right.
And you could see the look on his face where there's this pained look, but at the same time you see this determination that this is what I need to do. If I want to save these people, I have to be willing to lay down my life, right?
No. Yeah, true. And it is said, right? There's no greater love than to lay down your life for a friend, which is what he did.
Yeah, and it also kind of mirrors the transition of Loki in the comic books, because in Loki had always been the God of Mischief in the Marvel comic books. But now, actually, in the Marvel comic books, he has become the God of Stories. He's no longer the God of Mischief, but rather the God of Stories. And so, as the God of Stories, it actually has a more positive spin in the way that it sounds, and it kind of mirrors that, where Loki comes up, grabs all the timelines. He did not want that throne, and yet here he is. Because it's also funny because remember that the original Loki, prior
Always
to,
wanted the throne. Yeah.
always wanted the throne, and then here he is. He does not want this throne, and yet he takes the throne not because he wants it, but because he knows it's the only way. It's his obligation, it's his responsibility, it's the only way to save the multiverse in that regard. And it's in the same way where Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane says, take this cup from me, but not my will, but your will be done. And so in the same manner, but not his will, but this has to be done. Somebody has to do it, and the only person who has the power to do it is him, because he's the only one who has mastered
So, time.
time.
So, well, the other one who's mastered time is he. But obviously, they've realized that someone has to sit on the throne of time. And
Yes.
if it's not, if it's gonna be this, if it's gonna be this guy, it's gonna be horrible. So someone has to be king,
Yeah.
and therefore he has to fulfill his glorious purpose.
And I really love that. I really love that his glorious purpose changed. Where in the beginning, glorious purpose is him doing
For
something
himself,
magnificent for himself, but in this case, his glorious purpose now is doing something not for
for
himself
others.
but for others. And it's really it's a complete 180 of character, because even when he was going out there, he wasn't thinking, "Oh, I'm going to become God here, and I'm going to have control over the entire universe." He didn't even want that. He wanted to stay with his friends. Very, if you think about it, it's a very simple desire. Had
True.
developed a very simple desire, and yet, um,
He learned to find. He found a family, a community, and he learned how to appreciate that which he found.
and I think there are leadership qualities that you can pick up from this as well, in the sense that true leaders understand the value of the people that are with him, are under them, and the true leaders,
They care for the people.
yes, and are willing to sacrifice for them. And in the same manner that, Loki realizes, yeah, I might be on the throne, but this is actually a sacrifice. This is not something. It's actually, there was that quote and where this is actually more of a burden rather than um like the normal idea of glorious purpose, where it's all about himself, all about grandeur, about recognition and acknowledgement, but rather this is more of a burden. And sometimes the important thing to do is actually to take on that burden if it means it will unburden everybody else, right? And I think that was something that he discovered, and
Yeah.
I really like how, even sitting on the throne, it wasn't something like, oh, I'll just sit on the throne and I'm now the god of time, of all time, but rather that he had to struggle to bring everything together before he could actually sit on that throne.
Mm. Yeah,
And
it was a difficult thing for him to do.
I like the fact that at the end the timelines changed from a loom into where timelines are being weaved together into the tree of life. It's like a second Yggdrasil tree,
That's true. It was second tree.
right? Because we know that the original tree of Yggdrasil has been destroyed when during Ragnarok.
That's true. So it's like he remade it into a new home.
Indeed, indeed. Vince says that the funny thing is masking pa si like na si Loki. Masking like na si Loki than Thor.
That's true. At the very end, he became more of a king than Thor. But I mean, in the first place, Thor. Well, anyway, I'm not gonna dive into the Thor becoming king thing. Because Thor had a different journey on it. So, and also a different, totally different director. So, tara na yan. We can do character studies of the different Marvel or whoever characters. That would be an interesting thing. Because this one is more of like us analyzing the show. We're not doing a singular deep dive of Loki, although this is a decent dive of Loki nonetheless. Because I mean, the show is focused on him and script. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, baka we can tackle that some other time. Yung mga other characters.
So I guess as we wind down, what are your what was your takeaway from the series?
Oh, there's so much, and actually we have been covering for it. So like in Gross ni Loki, basically changes from internal to external. Like love for himself, and at the end, it just became love for others, right? And the sacrifice there is what made him worthy of his throne, right? As we mentioned, diba, yung kingship niya. He became worthy of that kingship because of his love. Ayan, we like, as I like to say, love is the answer. So, naging love is the answer din talaga here in this situation because of that.
And actually you're right when we reflect on the passage that you mentioned earlier, you know, the there's no greater love than this for one to lay down their life for a friend. And I think that was really, and when Jesus was saying that, he was actually talking about himself
Correct.
being sacrificed on the cross. And in the same manner, Loki sacrificing his life with these people that he has come to love in order to save billions of others, to save the timeline. And it's an interesting uh, you know dynamic in that regard.
Yeah. He was taking on everyone's burden.
And at the end, right, he created the tree of life. And so it's similar
Like,
to how Jesus came back to life even after death. And so
true.
in the sense that true sacrifice um does not really care whether you're going to live or die, but there is always, I guess I would look at it from a biblical perspective, that there will always be resurrection of life afterwards. In the same manner that when we sacrifice ourselves for the Lord, um, the promise is that we will spend our new lives in eternity with Him, right? In eternity in heaven.
Even I don't know, even yes here on Earth, or just the principle of like, double check ko lang kung biblical nga talaga to is yung he who ano yun? He who tries to uh gain the world for himself will lose it.
Yeah,
Right. That's a great one
that's
because
a passage.
that's also kind of what was happening with Loki, right? He was trying to get everything for himself, and he couldn't keep it. There was no way to keep it.
Yeah.
But when he gave it up, he got what was most important to him, because the lives of everyone he cared. So in giving up, he got what was most important to me.
Actually, one of the things that I would like MCU to explore is because, as we mentioned earlier, the TVA, the Loki series was mostly self-contained. They didn't really introduce a
Mm.
lot of other characters in the series.
Right, right.
Um, but one of the things I would like to see is the reaction of people knowing that now Loki is actually guarding time itself. That
Well,
idea,
some
especially,
people, some people might not ever interact at that level, right?
yeah. But remember that Thor had interacted with, what was that? The one at the end of the universe, at the end of the Thor Love and Thunder. So,
Right.
um,
It's a bit difficult, but I guess Thor might interact with the cosmic thing. I think definitely Strange will interact.
awesome. I got disconnected and OBS is reconnecting. There we go. So I
Are
don't
we
know what
back?
happened. Yes, I think we're back. So you were saying before we got disconnected.
Ah, no, I was just speculating as well. Sino yung mga iba. Pero I was thinking like Spider-Man, Strange, the magical people, Wanda possibly. I don't know if they're still keeping them, and of course Thor.
Well,
But
it is confirmed that the Wanda read somewhere that the Wanda of the main universe is already dead. So it's but I think because WandaVision was fairly popular, and I think there's still much to explore between the characters of Wanda and Vision. That they
mm,
might actually reintroduce Wanda, but it might be a variant. Anyway,
hmm,
from another multiverse. So
quite
anyway,
fun.
I think well, sadly, the Sony Spider Verse is separate from the MCU, so I don't think we'll ever actually be able to see any kind of interaction with that regard.
I
Uh,
don't know. I mean, we did get Tobey Maguire and
that's
I don't
true.
know.
But I
So
think the only agreement that Sony has right now is for specifically Spider-Man. So
yeah, yeah.
I don't think they have an agreement for the other Spider-Verse characters. So
But we'll see. I mean, basically Spider-Man and everything in Spider-Man. So money talks. But
that really depends on Sony. That really depends on Sony and the MCU. So yeah, I think my final thoughts are, I think my main takeaway from the series, at least with Loki, is that how do I put it? I think it's really about Loki's sacrifice, the character development of Loki, understanding that moral dilemma about choosing to save just the few people that he loves, or saving the entire multiverse, and ultimately understanding that saving the multiverse saves the people that he loves, even at great cost to him, is something more important than uh,
satisfying just his want.
exactly. And I think that's such great character growth where we see Loki not just being that selfish prick that he used to be,
Mm.
but rather learning to really understand what true sacrifice is. And
Yes, sir.
I think every true Christian in the end are is the kind of person that would uh you know understand what true sacrifice is all about, because it says in Romans 5:8, while we were sinners, Christ died for us. And so eventually we understand that God died for
Yep.
us even when we were still not in a relationship with him. We still were not
Mm.
connected with him. And so
Correct.
now that we have accepted him as our Lord and Savior, as a believer, this is where we see that in the end, our sacrifices mean something. They are important, and sometimes uh, we don't always get what we want, but the true reward is life eternal, right? With Jesus. And so in that sense that we would understand what it means to also sacrifice ourselves for the sake of others. I want to quote another passage, Philippians 2, where in Philippians 2 it says, we have to consider others more than ourselves, that we have to look not only to our own interests, but to the interests of others, because he himself, who was God, did not equate being God as something to be grasped, as something to take advantage of. And he was obedient even death on the cross. And so, I think that should also be the attitude of our hearts as well. And I do hope that we don't have to go through a world-changing event just to realize the importance of God's sacrifice in our lives. Before we too learn to sacrifice our time, our talent, our treasures for Him. So yeah.
Yeah, it does have it at the end of the day, the experiences we go through, it comes down to us how we want to learn from it. Because some of us do learn, but some don't. Which is kind of what happened to Sylvie and some other characters. No matter how many times they go through things, they didn't learn the most important thing.
Yeah.
So
And I think at the epilogue where all the characters, at the epilogue of the series, you can see that almost all of the characters, not all, almost all of the characters felt the impact of Loki's decision in their lives. We see Mobius learning that, there might be more valuable things in life than all the work that he's doing in the TVA. We see Sylvie eventually understanding that, Loki did the ultimate sacrifice, something that she might have not been willing to do, right?
something she was not willing to do.
She was not willing to do. We see B15, taking on a role of understanding the importance of life, regardless of the timelines, regardless of who they are, And I like the fact that her background, that she used to be a doctor. So
Yeah, that was cool.
actually, we could explore that a little bit more, but we don't have time. Um, so you can really see that everybody was impacted by Loki's actions, and I think someone who truly understands what love is and what sacrifice is will have that kind of impact on the people around them.
Yep.
So that's it. That's it for me.
That's it for me,
You,
yeah.
any final thoughts?
No, those were the final thoughts. Those were the final thoughts, sir.
So I think in the end, one thing that helps us realize how it is important, how love is so important, how God is so important in our lives, is by being part of a community, being part of a small group. In the same way that Loki character development did not happen until he was part of the TVA community, right? It didn't happen until he was
healthy part.
the
He found a healthy part of the community.
and yeah, because Miss Minutes is scary. It's crazy creepy.
I don't think Miss Minutes. There were a lot of parts like see Renslayer and the rest. They were TVA, but you know.
Yes.
So.
So, actually, we didn't even get to touch base on how, what do you call this? That other judge that tried to destroy the timelines when they were captured.
There are a lot of secondary characters. Again, Renslayer, Miss Minutes, the other judges,
X5, the movie star.
And even Sylvie, we only touched on her lightly, although like we primarily focus on the two big shifting gears, which is see Tyree / Kang and si Loki himself. But yeah, there's more to unpack.
So yeah. I think I just remembered because the judge in the end she was doing something wrong, but she had the good intentions. And we still understand. We still know that even if you have good intentions, if you do something wrong, it doesn't your intentions doesn't determine your destination, right? It's your direction. So and she still did something wrong, but in the end, you know that she was a woman of integrity because she understood that Renslayer's quest was only for power and only for herself, rather than for the good of everybody. Because in the end, that judge actually wanted what was good for everybody. And it just didn't, at the time, she just didn't understand that everybody included those branch timelines. Right? So, anyway, with that being said, I think, yeah, basically, it's important for someone, if they want to really understand what love is, if they want to really understand what healthy processing of trauma is, and understanding a healthy way of understanding what to do in moral situations and moral dilemmas, it's really important to be part of a community. And I think that's why um, it's important to also be part of a small group. That's why that's something that we here at Level Up espouse, and we here at Level Up encourage. If you are looking for a community who enjoy playing games and enjoy watching movies, series together, or whatever it is,
Any geeky hobby,
any
you
geeky hobbies,
probably got someone who can connect with you.
yes. So I think John can write down our Discord channel, which you can connect with us in the chat box. We'll have it in the chat box, and then join us also on our Facebook community page. We have a Facebook community group that you can join. It's also called Level Up Game Nights. Make sure to follow us and connect with us. We'll be glad to join you. Play games, watch movies, hang out, whatever it is, right? And if you need someone to listen to you, to talk to you, we're here for you as well. And we even pray for each other. And so, if that's
Every Saturday,
every Saturday,
9:30 p.m. GMT plus 8.
so if it's something that you're interested in, or if you're looking for a group where you belong, right? Not just that you are trying to fit in, but you belong. Because fitting in and belonging is two different things. So we're here for you. With that being said, I guess this is goodbye and good night.
Good night.
Avidazen. And till we see each other again. Bye bye.
Good night.